So recently, there have been a series of measures taken by European tourist cities to try and deter people from visiting. And if you don't live in a European tourist city, this might sound a bit counterintuitive. And I think many people in Europe who've probably been on holiday there more than other places might have an inkling as to why this might be. Because most of the cities have cited factors that are awfully familiar to the ones we talk about when it comes to mass migration. And I wanted to kind of pose the question of, hang on a minute, is some tourism bad? Now, I'm not going to say, all of it is, but I think there are some cases where our same complaints for mass migration, so things like loss of local identity, inflated cost of living for residents, reduction in availability of housing, because in the case of tourism, at least, you've got lots of Airbnbs and things opening up to cater to the tourist market, which makes buying a house, if you're a local, more difficult.
Interesting idea. I hadn't thought of that, but you're totally right. Because you think about people in Cornwall or Tenerife or whatever,
Mhm.
all of their complaints are exactly the same as people complaining about mass immigration into the country.
It's almost like there's something about lots of people from elsewhere coming to a place changes the character of the place and makes it worse for the people who live there,
Yeah, but
whether it's temporarily or permanently.
tourists leave.
That's true.
That's the big upside.
So it is one of the more positive points about tourism is that they go away eventually.
Yeah.
So don't worry, we're going to be talking about this. It's not going to be me just slamming tourism because I go on holiday sometimes, so I'd be a massive hypocrite.
No, but obviously tourism, as you say, the benefit is that you turn up, you spend a load of money with the locals, and then you
Mhm.
bugger off home. And they've
Yeah.
got now a load of money.
hmm
Whereas,
Well, we're going to be examining it and we're going to be looking at what they're doing as well.
okay,
And I think it's interesting because it kind of indicates to my mind a sort of sea change in political appetite in Europe more generally, because of course, with migration more generally, people are getting more and more hardline about it, at least certainly in places like France, for example. And so this also seems to be an indication that actually, no, we don't care if it brings us money. We want our local character. We want to preserve our culture. It shows that there's a sort of fighting spirit to preserving something that's actually worth fighting for in politics, which I wanted to zone in on. Also wanted to mention as well that there are other negatives that go with tourism that are parallels with mass migration. So lots of strains to things like infrastructure as well. So you've got all the litter, the mess, general wear and tear of buildings. You've got strained public services and extra sanitation to deal with. So it's obviously a cost, but is it worth it? Well, it seems even CNN are talking about over tourism in Europe. So they're not necessarily even talking about it like it's a bad thing. That's the funny thing. That a lot of the left wing outlets are kind of sympathetic towards it, which is surprising. So maybe this is our avenue to get our agenda back on the menu again. But yeah, this is an article titled "These were some of the 2023's worst destinations for over tourism. Here's to how to avoid the crowds next year." So I find that interesting because it's kind of implicit and fairly explicit as well that this is something that you want to avoid, right? You don't want to be going to the crowded places. You want to avoid these. You want to go to the nice places where they're not being spoilt by too many other people.
Incidentally, do they make suggestions about where to go?
They do.
Do they
yes.
say that some places are not not represented accordingly into tourist destinations, and you should avoid European overcrowded destinations and go somewhere else?
Yes.
Ah,
Well deduced. But
Hi, folks. Sorry to interrupt the video, but I just wanted to announce that we have a new line of merch in our merch store. The merch store was kind of empty for a while, and so I thought, right, okay, what do I actually want on shirts? And so I just went through some of the most epic and true things that I think that historical people have said, and John managed to make an amazing set of merch out of it. And we will have extra things coming in the store, such as posters for these to go on. Thanks for everything, folks. Now back to the video.
you would notice something as well about Britain, and that's part of the reason that I thought about this, is that there are, I lived in Bath while I was at university, and I was there for a purpose, I suppose. I wasn't a tourist, but I noticed that when it was tourist season, you would get so many people into quite a small town. It'd be very dense. And here is an article from 3 months ago in The Guardian saying the medieval city of Wells is named UK's top tourist destination. And you'll notice that if we look at the top 10, if The Guardian will allow us, apparently it won't,
Please give us money. No.
I'll do it later. All of the top 10, like Avebury in Wiltshire. You've been to Avebury, I know you have.
Yep.
It's very small, isn't it?
It's like, what, 100 people?
Yes. Like all of these places are sort of quaint rural villages. And do you think an influx of tourists will help enrich the environment of these places, or will it make it worse?
Well, in Avebury, they've put up signs in Japanese and Chinese on people's houses saying, this is private property, do not come in.
Mhm.
And the problem was that Chinese and Japanese tourists thought that Avebury was so pretty that it was a theme park and would just go into people's houses and people were like, I'm having breakfast, go away. What are you doing here?
I imagine that if I lived in a lovely, quaint place, I think, wow, I finally made it. I've, got this nice house.
The Japanese think it's fake, it's that nice.
Yeah. And that I'll be eating my breakfast and then I'll be dropping my cereal on the floor. There'll be a Japanese man at the end of my table. I'm just like, who are you?
It's
like a
very
fever
big.
dream. It'd be like a fever dream. You just got random Asians walking into your house. You're like, where did you come from? Where am I? But as an example of how beneficial it can be, because of course I'm not going to give a one-sided thing. This is a Devon and Cornwall tourism parliamentary discussion. I'm just going to read a little part from it because these are direct quotes from MPs in the southwest. Because of course this is an important tourist destination in Britain. I think Devon and Cornwall are known for being the kind of go-to places within the UK, both domestically and internationally, as the places you go if you want to go on holiday. But it says, tourism is a key employer of our two counties, representing 10% of all employment in Devon and 20% in Cornwall. So that's obviously massive, 20% of all employment. It goes on to say, it brought in around 7.3 billion in 2019. Obviously, that's significant because it was the non-COVID year, normal data. And also, it was 2.5 billion from international travel, which is 3.8% of the gross total value added to the area. Apparently, that's meant to grow to 15% by 2027. So it's going to go up significantly. And of course, part of the reason that people go to places like Devon and Cornwall, I grew up in Devon, so I know it very well, is that you've got these lovely, small, quaint towns where it's very quintessentially English still. You're going there, it's a nice experience, you get some ice cream, you go to the beach.
I've just noticed that they started the debate by arguing about scones.
About what?
You see scones over there.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I had to translate.
Oh, it's the Devon and Cornwall
Yeah,
debate,
they literally started with it. I know our two counties might be bitterly divided over how best to eat a scone. Sorry. It's just
By the
so
way,
cute.
I'm gonna put my opinion out here. Cream first and then the jam. Come at me, Cornwall.
I think you're right.
Thank you. Cream acts as butter, right? It's like if you were to make toast or something, you put the butter on first and then the jam. You wouldn't put the butter on top, would you?
I do love it. For people who don't know, small parts of England have bitter rivalries that go back hundreds of years over random bits of food.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how
that was just a snippet for you, but I like Cornwall. I go there. I like the people. So other than scones, yeah, Donald Trump. But they're also running articles like this. Like, here's the Telegraph, who's just kind of wrong about this. It said, how we fell out of love with Cornwall. And they're saying, in 2020, Visit Cornwall made a bold statement. That's the tourist, what's it called? Association, whatever. It became the first tourist board, that's the term for it, to explicitly ask British holidaymakers to stay away. 3 years later, the British public appears to have heeded the call. And I think that the Visit Cornwall tourist board is probably right in saying that actually this isn't that they listened to the advice. It's more that it was lockdown and people wanted to go abroad on holiday. They didn't want to stay in Britain, which was why there were massive spikes when the lockdowns and stuff were going on, and why they were telling people to stay away. So it's a very weird article from the Telegraph, but it's worth saying that tourist boards are now explicitly saying, leave us alone. I know this was COVID times, but still, there's still this certain amount of sentiment of, people in the West Country saying, oh, they're coming down here. They're taking our houses, them Londoners. It's a bit...
Somerset there.
It was a bit Somerset, yeah. I'd been too far away from my home county, I'm afraid. I've somewhat landed in the middle of Wiltshire and Devon. But I think that there's a certain amount of resentment in lots of tourist towns amongst residents of, well, this used to be a nice place to live and now it's not because everything's geared towards tourists and not us. and that some people are actually willing to sacrifice stuff. So some places on the continent that are doing so, moving away from my parochial sort of areas, we have Amsterdam, which they ran an ad campaign relatively recently aimed at British men between 18 and 35, which they said they will be fined if they are caught doing drunken, silly things. And apparently, that's not all they're doing. They're not only going to fine British people. Apparently, there are grassroots organizations going around the center of Amsterdam, and they just film stuff, all of the debauchery and the bad behavior, and put it online and try and get press coverage and public pressure to get rid of the tourists, which I find interesting because we're always told, well, they're enriching the economy. They're bringing us, they're bringing us wealth. Why would we possibly turn them away? Well, there are many meta narratives here, but it turns out people actually like not having horrible debauchery outside of their house. Who'd have thought? So another one here, this is quite an extensive one, and I'll need to appeal to you, Stelios, because the first one they mention here, this is titled, "We Spit in Your Beer, Inside Europe's Grassroots Fight Against Over-Tourism." And then there's a graffitied sign here on a wall.
Tourists go home.
I've actually seen this in Spain before, where they actually spray painted it on the side of a mountain, so you know they were serious, saying "Brits go home." And it was on the way into like a mountain village, and so I kind of felt like
Not Gibraltar.
No, I kind of felt like I'm not sure I want to go here anymore. But I kind of got the point that, you know, in loads of Brits go over to Spain.
Yeah,
we don't learn the language. We don't integrate in their culture. We kind of just set up our own parallel culture.
I do love that the Spanish are
thing.
becoming the IRA. So spray paint the local areas, balaclavas on, they're going to deal with the Brits. But,
Is there going to be a movement called Just Stop Tourism where locals are going to glue themselves in local paintings and statues?
I just say downside.
You said getting out, I suppose. So apparently in Athens, I'm going to read from this Telegraph article. In early December, buildings in Athens used for short-term rental were plastered with posters bearing what seemed to be official government logo. The message was clear: evacuate apartments immediately due to bed bug, even if I can speak, infestation, or face a €500 fine. So these posters were fake, by the way. They were just putting them there to discourage the tourists and make them leave. Obviously, this wasn't an official thing, but it was trying to get people away from an area which had lots of Airbnbs, because Airbnbs are the big bugbear, if you will, with a lot of people who campaign against tourism.
If we make up a bunch of lies about how awful where we live is, and then put up posters being like, "Oh, it's full of bud begs here," we might be able to get rid of a bunch of people who have just turned up. That's a race to the bottom. We're not going to win that one.
By the way, there are lots of bed bugs in London, so you shouldn't go there, especially if you're a Channel migrant.
Yeah, but this doesn't really work for us, because it's like, I mean, I'm sure you saw recently there's a lot of Africans making fun of Indian street food. Like, they make TikToks being like, "Look how unhygienic this is." Like, even the Africans are like, "Jesus Christ."
Surely the Indians can hit back and say, at least we have food. You know?
Well, yeah, most of them. But I'm just referencing the point. If we put up like, "Oh man, there's bed bugs in London," the Indians will probably be like, "That's fine." I don't think we're going to win that war.
More food, isn't it?
That's the Chinese, isn't it?
I suppose so. Close enough. So, yeah, it seems like there's some non sort of official stuff going on in Athens. I don't know what you think about this Stelios, but the sort of Athenian state, if you will, haven't done anything to combat over-tourism. Is this something that you've encountered?
Well,
because you are an Athenian.
I think there are a lot of other problems that the Athenian state, city-state, and also the Greek nation has to deal with. And they don't have to do with tourism.
Mm-hmm.
Tourism is something primarily good for Greece.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you were showing us some videos before we started.
Yeah. Let's
There's loads.
not go there.
Do you mind if I mention it? Because it is mental.
Well, I mean, it is mental.
It was videos of loads of Middle Easterners in Athens with Palestinian flags on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
I was like, "What are you doing here? What the hell are you doing in Greece?" Maybe that's worse than the tourists.
But I think, for Greece, you need the economy to be generating money. And
yes,
as everyone and their dog knows, the Greeks haven't always had the best economic management by their governments.
But you would want a Greek economy to be good and competitive, so it is going to, let's say, carry forward the Greek nation.
Mhm.
You don't want Greece to become just a geographic region that generates GDP in the same way that you don't want that for the UK.
Of course, yeah.
So, but I will tell, because we shouldn't go on a tangent. I'll tell you something about over tourism, this sort of messing up your experience of an island. There are some wonderful islands called Kufonisia. It's like the Deaf Islands. Funnily, most people there have the surname Green. It's, in Greek, Prasinos.
Okay.
Yeah, but
I thought it was just a bunch of Brits.
yeah, but 20 years ago, it was heaven on earth. You would have, even mid-August, you'd have 200, 300 people. Now it's completely filled. You have to reserve things 1 or 1.5 years before
Mhm.
you go there. And when you go there, most taverns, they tell you don't have half the menu because I've run out of it.
Yeah, well, some of the Greek islands get a real raw deal. I mean, they must make a ton of money, but
Yeah, it's
some
a
of them
raw
get
deal.
some of them get the drunk British tourists, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I
I've
mean,
seen just one thing closely. I've seen an inscription on a hotel
Mhm.
in English in Greece saying, "Please don't vomit in the pool." So-
good advice. Supposedly Barcelona is also doing something. Apparently, the city acknowledges there's a problem and has introduced various measures. They raised the nightly tourist tax. So they tax tourists per night, put a limit on the number of tour groups, frozen construction of hotels in the centre, and tightened regulations for those hoping to rent apartments on Airbnb. So they're the ones
you know,
taking
yeah.
the most.
To be fair, anything to destroy Airbnb.
Yeah, I don't like them. They suck.
People might have forgotten, they banned, I think it was Lawrence Southern and a series of other right-wing YouTubers for even using their services
Mhm.
for doing literally nothing. Like, I think Lauren just tried to book one and they banned her, and she was just like,
Hotels are better anyway. Like Airbnb, you've got all these rules and they'll charge you cleaning charges. You go in a hotel, they won't do any of that.
I don't know, Airbnb do not deserve it.
Hotels are just cheaper and better. I don't see the
Depends on where
appeal.
you are.
Yeah, I suppose. If you've got like a nice waterfront mansion or something for a treat holiday or something, then I can kind of understand. It's a self-contained thing. If you're just staying in a room, who cares? And apparently they're quoting here: "Tourists go home," yells the graffiti all over the old city, close to major tourist attractions. "Your luxury trip, my daily misery," is another slogan graffitied on the walls.
Can we put that in London?
"Your luxury trip, my daily misery."
Yeah.
We put it in Swindon.
Yeah.
I think we need it here. Apparently, they also acknowledge the other side as well. They say those who painted this have been to New York, Berlin, London, Lisbon, Tangier, Istanbul, reads one sign in response. But they don't want anyone coming to this neighborhood. Hypocrisy is the worst way to fight against gentrification. But gentrification, surely, I mean, it's got a negative word, negative
I don't even know.
connotation.
What does it really mean?
It just means making a place nicer, really. That's how it's used in this day and age. It doesn't always mean that in the sort of objective sense. Like sometimes people, lots of sort of moneyed people can move in and move the locals out. That does happen sometimes. But that's more in sort of the southwest of England, where they're buying up all the nice homes, all the holiday homes, Londoners, people like that. But I don't necessarily see it as an inherently bad thing. And finally, Venice. Apparently, Venetians are walking a tightrope between objecting to over-tourism, which makes normal life in the city a nightmare, and the knowledge that the income from those same tourists keeps the city afloat. And that's not just a term, as in they need to generate the revenue to keep the city from sinking into the ocean, because it's built on like a marshland, wasn't it? And so it's slowly sinking into the water, and they've got to pay lots of money to put lots of soil or something. I can't remember the exact specifics of it. But basically, the only reason that city's still standing is because of all of the tourist money paying for the fact that they can preserve it. Otherwise, a lot of it would be sinking into the ocean. Also, whenever climate people say, "But look, Venice is literally flooding," it's because it's sunk, not because the sea level's necessarily risen. So that's worth bearing in mind as well. And another one as well, certainly a very beautiful city. Florence has banned new Airbnbs and short-term rentals from the centre. So there's clearly lots of stuff going on here, and all at a sort of comparable amount of time. It was sort of late this year that all of this was going on. And I just found it very interesting that lots of these places you associate with tourism, with making money from tourism, that's kind of the bedrock of their economy. And yet they're saying, hang on a minute, even in a sort of potential recession, economic downturn at the very least, we're turning these people away. So it was nice to see that they're actually valuing their local community now that they realize that it could be under threat from, tourists, from people coming there that aren't from the local area. And just to prove that I'm not being a complete hypocrite, let's talk about the Brits and the damage we do. Brits on Tenerife holiday told to go home in warnings left by furious locals. Here's another one. I lived on the Canary Islands before British tourists ruined it. Now it's ghastly. And another one here. Lanzarote launches bid to attract more British tourists months after the island's president sparked outcry by calling for higher quality of holiday makers.
I want a better class of people.
Mm.
I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah, but I think that complaining about British and Irish tourists, which it says in the first line here, we do go there and just get drunk and bloat up in the sun, like great big. Yeah.
I thought everyone who did that went to Shagaloo. Like Lanzarote was sort of where.
Oh, we do it wherever we go, don't we? Really, like for a certain number of people, getting drunk on holiday seems to be the thing to do. Even though when I go on holiday, it's like the last thing I want to do, because you should be going about the place, seeing what it looks like, not staying in one place and just binging. But that's just me. But yeah, as I said, it can do some good. Obviously, sort of Cornwall, England, Greece, these are all examples of places that seem to benefit economically at the very least, even though actions have been taken to push back against it. And obviously, it's good that it's pushing the notion of preserving your community, because that's what we want to see, really, isn't it? We want to see people appreciating the value of having a close-knit local community whereby the people who are about. You don't have random people coming in and changing the atmosphere that has been created organically. There's something beautiful about it. And unless you've experienced it, it's very difficult to put a tangible sort of value upon it. But everyone who lives in a place like that knows what it's like. And it is something worth preserving. It's also worth mentioning, I haven't had an article for this, but places like the Serengeti National Park in Tanzania as well, all of the tourism there helps fund the national park's efforts. So it's very contingent on where you're actually going. Like if it's a major city in Europe, you're probably not going to be helping too much. It's already an economic center. You're probably just going to make it even more expensive than it already is. If it's a smaller place, or it's not a touristy place, you're a great example of this, Callum, because you go to places that don't see too many tourists, right? Afghanistan, places in Russia, Ukraine during,
war zones.
Yeah. And I imagine that your money probably helps out the people who live there. I imagine, the people in all of these countries, you went across the Baltic as well, not necessarily a popular holiday destination. And so it's not a problem, that sort of thing, right? In fact, it probably helps the people. Whereas there are lots of places where there's just too many people, it's making it not nice. So my kind of advice would be either visit some of these destinations out of season if you are insistent on going. Like I would like to see Rome. It's probably one of the places that gets over tourism, but I'm a massive history nerd, so I want to see all of the Roman architecture in its flesh. Go to places that aren't overcrowded and try and avoid busy places. It makes it nicer anyway, so that should be what you're going for. And respect local customs. Avoid, culture clashes. Whenever I go on holiday, I try and learn the language and at least make an effort. And normally it's sort of met with a sort of a smirk, just like, oh, you British people are terrible. But at least they appreciate that I've tried. And go to less common destinations. And they are out there. Like there's this place that I'm unintentionally going to, Docks. The picture's not coming up, but lesser known UK town that's just as beautiful as Bath, but without the crowds. And there it is. I'm not going to tell you where it is, but there it is. They do exist.
Enjoy the Easter egg hunt.
Yes. I mean, you can just search the headline if you're that desperate. But there are places that aren't ruined. You can visit nice places. And I would like people to just be, a bit more considerate about it. You don't really have to go too far out of your way. I'm not saying you're terrible for going on holiday to these places. I've been to Venice, went to Prague in the summer last year. I've been to some of these places that people are complaining about. I've been part of the problem. So I'm not going to wag my finger.
I think that basically these articles are really weird because it's like saying, let's look at Rome or a big city. It suffers from over tourism. So go to that small village there.
And ruin it.
And ruin it. Yeah, so it's like the village is targeted for termination or something.
Yeah. And obviously, I'm not saying I have all the answers. I'm just giving you food for thought. I'm not telling you what to do.
The millions of tourists go to one place. Look at this village. There are only 100 people live.
It deserves to die.
I think I'm going to end the segment by saying the perfect kind of person is someone who's born on a spot and just doesn't move ever. That's how you solve this.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this episode on a gentleman's guide to cocktails. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.